Hi everybody, thanks for taking the time to watch this presentation. I'll be covering off the Algo 8180 IP alerter and pager. The 8180 has a dual function, has two SIP registrations. One we can use as an alerter and one for paging. Let's go through the alerting first. Basically, as an alerter, it can be set up to, for example, as a loud bell. So if we, for example, put a new cloud-based hosted system into a business or a local IPPBX installation, and this particular customer has a warehouse or a workshop area that they used to have a loud bell in on the old analog system, we will need a voice over IP equivalent to replace it with. So instead of mucking around with ATAs and extra wiring and 240 volt bells and all that extra time they're going to invest and waste in putting together a bolted together or hodged together system, we can actually replace that loud bell with an 8180. Now, using one of the SIP registrations that are on this unit, we can now make it so that when that SIP registration is rung, the 8180 will ring on an incoming call. So, and the volume can be adjusted up and down as per needed, and or it can actually be dynamic depending on the ambient noise and the environment that the 8180 is in. On the other side of the coin, we can also use it as a pager. So it's got a second SIP registration we can set up for a paging unit. So when we dial another SIP extension, e.g. 201, the 8180 will chime, as in for the paging coming through, and then you are speaking through and can do paging. Okay? Now, the advantages of this is that you can use the 8180 in the most basic format in what we've just talked about, but we can also start using it in more complex solutions for a customer. For example, we can have up to 7 paging groups on the 8180 called multicast, or paging groups as we used to know them. So, and we can either dial them individually through different master units and have additional slave units. For example, if I had one master unit with extension 201, I could put another 5 8180s in different parts of the building across the same LAN network and set them as slave and have them multicasting into a different group. So we can have page group 1, 5 of them go off, page group 2, another 6 different units would go off. So, but all using one SIP registration. We could even get to the point where we can dial the main extension number on the master unit and then dial a pre-code, a DTMF code into the unit to activate the individual paging groups, so we could just have one registration instead of multiple. It's totally flexible and up to you how you manage it. So we've got the multicasting scenarios, of which we'll go into more detail later. Where would we use this? Well, right now we are doing an awful lot of schools. Schools are a good market because they are upgrading through with all the fiber and etc., voice over IP, data networks, etc. As new schools are built, they are putting fiber between buildings and fiber between floors, and then naturally with the distribution, category 5, category 6 network, IP network going out around the rooms. So they can't use their old traditional paging. Now, a lot of them had this, the old analog and copper-based paging systems, but naturally these now won't work over fiber, so they need to be replaced and or integrated with. We have a number of options on how to integrate with, but the schools are a definite target market for the Algo. We've also got prisons, we've got warehousing, truck stops, supermarkets, retail stores, airports, security buildings. The list goes on. Basically, wherever you want to have a paging and or ringing solutions, the Algo will suit and set it and do the job very well. On top of that, we're just talking about the 8180 in this presentation, we've also got the 8301, which is basically a integration unit to an analog paging, but it also can do broadcast schedules, etc., etc. But we'll go into that a little bit more later. The coverage of a 8180 This table goes through various examples: home, natural, normal conversation, factory, busy, machine shop, etc. Just gives you an idea of how much sort of what coverage an 8180 will give. So for example, in a quiet warehouse, a lone 8180 would be 250 meters. Voice paging would be 64 meters. Okay, so it just gives you a snapshot of what sort of coverage you're going to get. But this, of course, remember, this will entirely depend on the environment that you're working in. This is a guideline only. So let's have a look at the physical unit itself. It's a compact little unit, very well built, solid quality. So this is the front view. The two things I just wanted to point out on this is that, number one, you've got a little microphone here. This is used in conjunction. It's optional, can be used in conjunction for when you page or call the unit on auto answer. You can actually talk back and have a two-way conversation because it has this microphone all on board. So areas, sort of examples you'd use that in is in a classroom where you've got the an 8180 for paging within the classroom, and you could actually activate it, ring it, and then people can actually yell back at you if you're looking for the teacher or whatever application you want to use it for. The blue light indicator down the bottom here tells you the status of the system, what's happening with it, and you can also program it to be a message waiting light if you so wish. For example, if there's a message in the office of somebody, it'll sit there flashing blue. So again, just another little trick you can use to do with the units. This is the back of the unit. I want to spend a little bit of time here because it is actually very well put together, and the techs actually love this unit because it is so damn easy to install. Fundamentally, you've got a network connection there. That is PoE. That's how you power it up. If you don't have a PoE switch or to plug into it, you need to get a PoE injector. Now you've got the terminals here. This is an output. The first two here is an output for an external speakers where you can actually put, I think it's an 8106 Bullhorn, Algo Bullhorn speaker on it. So you could actually have this unit here paging in a warehouse and then cable off a analog bullhorn off it to page in another zone. So you're doubling the area that you're actually covering. You've got an audio input and you've got a dry contact relay. Let's just move over to the right-hand side one where we've just gone down this list here. These little buttons down the bottom here make the Algo really nice to install. First of all, you can play what the ringtone is by pressing the play key, etc., and adjust the volume, etc., manually if you're actually next to the unit. You can also control that via the browser as well to program it. But one of the key things is once you actually plug this into the network, it's a DHCP deployment by default. So there's two ways you can actually find the IP address. Number one, there is some software called the Algo Locator, and that will scan the entire customer's network and find all the Algo products that are there and give you the IP address. The other way, if you just plugged it in, is simply press this menu button here 3 times down to, and the unit will talk to you every time you're pressing it. And it'll basically, on the third port thing, it'll say give device status, and then if you press select to select that option, this button down there, then it'll actually talk to you and tell you what the IP address is, e.g. 192.168.1.114, and it'll just keep repeating that until you tell it to stop. So from a technician's perspective, you plug it in, you mount it, get the IP address, mount it, walk away down to your laptop. You can program it. You can test the ringing, you can test the page, set everything all up, all via the browser, whilst you're in the room if you've got wireless connection. So a nice, easy unit to install and use. When you're mounting it, it comes with its own bracket. The bracket here just screws to the wall, 2 screws, and then to clip it in, your network cable come in the back. Connect the network cable, you put it in the top, and then just drop it down and clicks, and it locks very nicely into the bracket. Physical dimensions of this thing, it's not a huge footprint at all, so it's pretty unobtrusive. It's 16 centimeters high by 10 centimeters wide, and at this point here, it's 5.5 centimeters at the widest point. And there's the footprint of the bracket. Pretty straightforward. Some of the specifications, just a couple of points through, you can look through the list yourself here. Just a couple of points I want to point out. Number one is the power input, 48 volt PoE, class 0, okay? It gives you the wattage here. I just wanted to flag this, not so much from an Algo's perspective, but more from the point of what you are going, what switch you're going to put on it, what PoE switch you're going to buy. A lot of the PoEs aren't created equal. Some of them are sort of say, well, I've got a 60 watt maximum power allowance, or a 55, or an 80 watt, or a 70 watt, or 120 watt. When you're deploying a voice over IP, when you're deploying voice over equipment full stop, please be aware of what the maximum loads are of each device. Otherwise, you could overload the device to the point devices could fail. Okay. Now, an Algo at maximum power draw, an 8180, is 12.95 watts. Now that is generally at paging or ringing at full volume, so the amplifier is really cranked up. At idle, it's only 1 watt. Okay, so just when you're putting together your solution, just manage what PoE switches you are using or what PoE switches the customer has got, and just be aware of the trap, because of post-deployment, suddenly a phone starts playing up, or an Algo 8180 restarts for any reason when you're paging. 99.9% of the time, that will be your problem. The PoE switch is under-spec'd. Anyway, configuration, web interface, you can auto-provision, etc. Talks about the sound. Internal memory is 3 meg for recordings, and you can actually record your own announcements and recordings and ringing and etc. and load them up into the unit. The relay, 30 volts, 50 milliamps, speaker output, audio output. It talks about the default ringtones that are loaded into the unit, what environment you're meant to be in. Non-condensing, don't put it in the rain, it's not waterproof. If you want a waterproof unit of this type, you're looking for the 8186, I believe it is, off the top of my head. NAT, compliance, and dimensions. Just want to touch off a few points with the advanced paging and ringing. The technical side added on to the end of this presentation. The technical presentation will go into this in more detail, but from a sales perspective, effectively the 8180 has got 9 multicast zones, e.g. we call them page groups. But out of that 9, you can use 6 or 7 of them, and then you've got things like all page, you've got music on hold that you can play through it. So these are counted as part of the channels. Okay, so have a talk to us about that if you particularly want to go to the zones. And we'll be talking a little bit about the 8301 in the next couple of points down. The paging zones can be set up in a single zone by dialing a SIP registration number or as DTMF selectable. Now what that means is that, let's just pick on the DTMF selectable. Let's say we've got one master unit, and then we are going to dial into it and then dial the extension number and then *1. And that'll page star group 1, *2, group 2, 3, etc. Okay, so that's just using one SIP registration and some post digits to access the multicasting, and we can set up all the different paging groups. Okay, or we can have a master for each group and then include the slaves into the different groups, and so you're dialing individual SIP registrations on individual masters around the thing. I hope that makes sense. If not, let us know. The Algo paging endpoints can be the 8180, the 8188, the 8186, and the 8128. Fundamentally, very much the same. So once you get your head around what the 8180 can do, for example, the 8186, which is the bullhorn weatherproof version of this, is just about identical in regards. Now, all through at the moment, I've just been talking about basically a ringer and using in a ring environment, or paging and some basic paging groups. If you use the 8301, which is a controller unit, that can expand you to 50 multicast units. Okay, now on a large site, this is really a controller is the way to go. The controller also has scheduled announcements, etc. So you can have it for a bell cycle in a school, announcements made during a school day, announcements made at an airport. You hear all these bing bong announcements, don't leave your bags lying around, that sort of thing. This is what the 8301 will do. So there's actually a separate presentation on the 8301 on the site, which I suggest you look at. But for solutions, just because you might sell, you'll in your sales you'll have 1 or 2 or maybe 5 units in one sale, but in a larger deployment, this is a full-blown solution in regards to management and control and announcements and all that kind of thing. And there's a couple of diagrams later we'll touch on. But if you want the full information on that, go to the 8301 presentation. The IP paging points, I haven't picked on the 8180 particular in this area, can be in multiple paging groups, e.g. so you can have a unit and paging group 3, 5, and 6. Okay, so you just tick those options in the unit, and then now that unit's across that group, no problems. The number of Algo paging endpoints is unlimited. E.g., you could have 180 as the master pager, and then you can have hundreds, and I mean hundreds, of other slave 8180s, and when you page that one unit, everyone else will page at the same time. Okay. You can put them into multiple page groups, what we've talked about. You can have up to 5 SIP registrations used for ringing. Okay, now this is quite a handy little extra we've got here. So what we can do here is that we gave an example where you've got a warehouse that when an incoming call comes in, the Algo will ring. Well, what if we've got 2 different companies, or we've got 2 different departments, sales and service? We could actually have a second SIP registration that will actually ring in a totally different ringtone. We could actually even have a recording and load it up saying, this is a call from ABC company. This is a call from ABC company, and it keeps repeating and repeating and repeating. Or then if they dial the other option, or it comes on a different set of lines and rings the other SIP registration, it can say this is a call from XYZ. Okay, now extreme, you could actually do recordings, or you could just simply use different ringing. So, and the staff would know that this call I'm about to pick up off the Algo is this, or this call is the other one. Okay, so quite flexible, very handy. You can assign these ringing registrations to any other multicasting groups, etc. Some of the key features and capabilities: loudness. It's an integrated amplifier. It's a very highly tuned speaker, and I know that sounds all very salesy and everything, but I'm telling you, it is. It's gorgeous. It's the loud. You can put the Algo 8180 into full volume, and whether it's barking, bonging, and I'm talking that when you're next to these things and it's starting to do some of the ringtones, like one of them's like a Big Ben clock bonging, you can feel it, the vibrations hitting you. It actually, you can physically feel it. But the speaker's not distorting. It is really quite high quality. I love this product. I really do. From a technical point of view and a sales point of view. So I can't emphasize it's a Canadian product, and it is good product. Multicasting, we've talked a bit about that, so we won't go too far into that master-slave relationship. The ambient noise compensation using SoundCare, it's trademark technology. Fundamentally, an example of that would be in a quiet room like I'm in right now, and the phone call came in, it's not going to blast across noisily, it's going to tune itself to the amount of noise that's in the room, so it's softly ringing. But then I might have 20 people in this room talking really loudly, and the Algo 8180 is going to adjust the ringing so that people can hear it in regards to the noise that's out there. And we've got outputs to external equipment and devices, loudspeakers, etc. Configuration provisioning is all done via the browser, or you can point it to a provisioning server using TFTP, FTP, or HTTP, and point out it using your DHCP options. Paging talkback, we've talked about that with the microphone, so you can talk backwards and forwards. Ringtones, we've got several preloaded ringtones all on board, but you can also have your own voice announcement or sound effects. With the 8301 particularly, we could actually set up, or even on a very basic system, we could set up one of the SIP extensions, so when you dial it, has a lockdown alarm. So it plays an alarm of, this is the school is in lockdown, please or pupils are to do da 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 da. As long as the unit is ringing, it'll play this message. Okay, the 8301 does it much better, but at a pinch, you can get the same sort of solution or similar solution with the 8180. And the blue light indicator we have also talked about in regards to what we can use it for, message waiting, or whether it's registered or whatever, programmable. So deployment examples, just some basic pictures just to sort of show you a little bit of how it works. Using SIP, now we've got a cloud in the middle here, so he can be pretty much anything. Next slide goes into and details that more. But fundamentally, we've got a SIP phone. It rings the SIP registration on the multicast, or pages it, for example, and at the same time, this slave, and this slave will actually go off hook. And these are all the different models: ceiling, mounted speaker, bullhorn, etc. So that's what your multicast fundamentally is doing. What can you connect it to? As long as it's SIP, it doesn't matter. You can connect it to anything. It's whoopsie, I'll go back up one. It can be a local SIP server, 3CX, Trixbox, IPPX, NEC, Transtel, Hybrix. The list goes on. It doesn't matter what you connect it to. It can be, as long as it's a SIP compliant unit, it will work. Okay, just avoid your encryptions and all that kind of thing. It's just got to be a standard SIP. Everything's driven off the PoE. Or we can have a hosted solution. Okay, again, doesn't matter if what the hosted could be Tutor, could be anything, could be a Mitel host, it could be, again, doesn't matter. When it boils down to it, as long as it's SIP compliant, the 8180 will work behind the NAT, etc. Multicast, so if we've got a SIP server in the cloud, for example, on this stage, we've got a router going through the PoE, we've got a multicast master speaker, and he's paging from a local call. So the local call here has dialed the SIP number, it's through the switching of the SIP server, it's gone through to the master, and now we're paging off to the various devices. Now the only point I'm trying to make here is really you can put the specific device you need for that specific area. For example, the 8186 in a warehouse area, or bullhorn, or an open area, weather, it's going to be hit by the weather, that type of thing. That's where you want to put it, and then you say just horses for courses and what you need. Finally, just really want to have a little bit of a talk about the Algo 8301. Now, this unit here I've referred to before, and there is a full presentation for it, but fundamental, what it's used for is, let's say you've got a school and they're putting in new buildings, but the old buildings are still there and they've still got the old analog paging system. But you've gone and put in a brand new SIP solution, cloud or local IPPX, don't really care. We need to integrate that with that, which is an analog amplifier. Okay, so the first thing that the 8301 will do is that you can set it up as a SIP registration. It'll interface through to your existing analog amplifier. At the same time now, it will also now start managing your SIP paging speakers, e.g. the 8180s or 8186s, etc. So you can now start setting up your multicast groups and paging and all that kind of thing through to your new part of your building, which has all got fiber all through the floors, etc. And finally, the other thing it does is it's got a scheduler functionality in it. So we can have years, days of the week, and set a whole bunch of different scheduled plans into that day. For example, we could, on a school, we could set up the bell environment. So for, pre-bell, before we get into the first class, 15 minutes before you get to the class starts, class stops, lunch times, morning teas, afternoon teas. Even to the point, if you have a parent-teachers day, you can actually have announcements going off through the paging system telling parents when to get in and out of the next meetings. You can have it in a retail shop where you've got scheduled music going through the PAs and background music, which is piped in. But then you've also got announcements. The the staff accessing the paging system via the phone for announcements, but also pre-planned scheduled announcements, safety, OSH. The list is boundless in what you can do with this thing. You can, in a factory environment, you could have OSH announcements playing regularly through the day, saying, "Don't forget, don't put your hand in the bandsaw" type scenario. It just continues on and on. The imagination suddenly starts going a little bit crazy. So this is a really good product, and it complements anything that you're currently selling, in whether you're selling hosted or on-premise IP equipment. This is really a nice little unit.